So Laith, we are outside the Mar Elias Palestinian Refugee Camp in Beirut, Lebanon. Could you tell us about this camp? It's not particularly well known amongst the broader world.
First off, I want to say we're standing beside this commemoration for Nelson Mandela, and it has this quote from him in Arabic: "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people." And it's Arafat and Nelson Mandela, which were really good friends. You can see images of all the various leaders that were assassinated, and of course a big mural of Arafat. Let's start walking inside while we talk about it.
Sure.
You know, Mar Elias is the smallest Palestinian refugee camp in the world. Whether it's inside Palestine, Lebanon, in Syria, Egypt, or Jordan. This refugee camp was built after the Israeli retreat from Beirut. So it's the youngest refugee camp also. Not only the smallest, but this is the youngest. And it hosted Palestinians that were, slaughtered, ran away from Tell al-Zatar refugee camp and Shatila camp. The survivors came here, and it's called Mar Elias because there's a church right beside it dedicated to Saint Elias or Elia. So the neighborhood is Christian. Many Christians also, Christian Palestinians came here.
Before we continue, perhaps you could tell us something about this young man. Who is that? Do you know?
So this is Muhammad al-Rantisi. He is one of the warriors of Palestinian Islamic Jihad that were martyred on the front here with Palestine since the beginning of this war. There's been a few Palestinian martyrs from both Islamic Jihad and Hamas.
Mm-hmm. And before we talk some more about this camp, you mentioned Shatila. I know a lot of us know about that horrifying story, but you could just briefly summarize what happened there.
Yes, in 1982, the Israelis occupied Beirut, and they surrounded Shatila camp and the Sabra neighborhood beside it. And Ariel Sharon, at the time leading the Israeli force, blockaded the Sabra and Shatila area. And then his best buddies, the Christian supremacists, the Phalange, they were thrown into the camp. And for 3 days, the Israeli forces were firing flares while the Phalange committed mass murder and mass rape of all the unarmed Palestinian civilians that were inside the camp. Of course, if some of our viewers don't remember, the Palestinian fighters were, left Lebanon on boats because the American president at the time, Reagan, promised to protect the Palestinian refugees if the fighters left to Tunis, and of course that didn't happen.
And to this very day, these so-called Christians from the Phalange movement, they are pro-Israel, as I understand it, and extremely opposed to any form of resistance to Western domination in Lebanon.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes, and right now we're still living this situation of there is some collaborators with Western imperialism that either do it for money or because they're driven by hate.
Right. I want to ask you about something which strikes me as unusual, and you may have some insight into it. So up here we have in front of us a photograph of Mahmoud Abbas, and of course there's Arafat, and then over here you have a photograph of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, who was just murdered by the Zionist entity in Tehran. And what do you make of this? One would think, we are told, that there is a tremendous level of disunity within the Palestinian community, but it seems that the residents here are inclined to pay homage to all of these individuals. What do you make of this?
Yes, look, the Palestinian people, like any other people, have many divergent political parties and movements. And for now, although there's a huge lot of criticism for Mahmoud Abbas's collaboration, people still differentiate between the factions on the ground, like let's say Fatah here in the camp here. When you hear their statements and see their positions, they're totally different than what Mahmoud Abbas. And similarly, even inside the West Bank itself, in Tul Karim and Jenin and others, many of the fighters are Fatah fighters. And they are being identified by Mahmoud Abbas and his security forces to the Israelis, right? And being assassinated. So you could see that the thing that brings Palestinian people together is resistance to occupation, is the liberation. And anyone that is standing outside that consensus, although there is no internal clash, there's no, the Palestinians don't want to, right now, for instance, confront Mahmoud Abbas. They are not happy with how Mahmoud Abbas and others are acting. Right. But as you see, like, people are proud of their background, and their history. Like Fatah,
what is this?
This it says Fatah, which is the party of Mahmoud Abbas.
And that young fighter,
it says Fatah. It says, is the light of revolution. Okay, the torch of revolution. So people remember that Fatah gave a lot of martyrs for the liberation struggle. So there's still that feeling that it could be much better than what it is now because of the fact that Fatah fought this war of liberation for a long time.
And so you had an opportunity to speak to, I guess, some of the leaders of the camp, or at least people who liaise with members of the public. Did they have an opportunity to tell you about how the camp has been affected by the horrors that are currently unfolding in Palestine and now in Lebanon itself?
Yes.
How are they coping with that?
Yes, there is, of course, because Shatila is in the Dahi, in the southern suburb of Beirut. So some of the bombing happened around it. So there was a wave of internally displaced. There's also the refugee camps in the south of Lebanon, Buruj al-Barajne and the Rashidiyya camp and so forth, that also had attacks on them and or around them. And so you had a wave of Palestinians leaving the refugee camps in the south, the refugee camps around the Dahi, and you had also all the Syrians that were in those camps, because some people may not remember, but a lot of Syrian refugees came to Lebanon, and a lot of them actually ended up staying in the Palestinian refugee camps because of the cost of living is cheaper. And now they have some of those Syrian refugees also coming to here. It's a smaller percentage. And also we were told that there was even Lebanese citizens from the south of Lebanon that came to Mar Elias here. And so there's around 250 families that are now hosted here in Mar Elias.
So essentially the refugees are hosting the refugees.
Refugees are hosting refugees, and
Yes.
our host that we interviewed earlier, she actually was a Palestinian refugee from Syria. So
Wow.
her family came from the north of Palestine, ended up in Syria in the Yarmouk camp in Damascus. And when the Wahhabi death squads attacked Yarmouk, many of the Palestinian refugees came to here. So she didn't even come to Mar Elias when she moved here. She went and lived in the Dahi. And because the attacks on the Dahi, now her and her family are here in Mar Elias. So you could see refugee from Palestine to Syria, from Syria to the Dahi, from the Dahi to now Mar Elias, and if Mar Elias gets attacked. So Palestinians now are living multi-generations of refugee status, but also multiple waves in their own lifetime. They have been displaced so many times because of the depravity of the Israelis and the West.
You know, every camp I've been to, Unrwa, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, is omnipresent. It's, its facilities are noticeable all over these camps. I have yet to see, however, today, in our brief time here, any Unrwa office or clinic. Is Unrwa present here? And if so, have its operations here in Beirut been hindered by the unconscionable efforts of Israel and its Western backers to destroy the organization?
You know, there is a Unrwa clinic on our path right now. We're going to see it. Okay. But it is very unfortunate. We were told that Unrwa decided to close the clinic here in Mar Elias since the beginning of the invasion in the south. Mm-hmm. And that is very big problematic because already the refugee camp needed medical support, the residents here, before this war. And now there's all these families that are here that are internally displaced, and they also will have no medical support. So now it's compounded. The failures of Unrwa are compounded in this camp now.
And was it explained to you why they made that decision to close their clinic? Was it financial constraints? Did they consider themselves, their staff, to be too exposed to the Israeli bombardments? What motivated that decision?
There is no reason given by Unrwa. This is also what's frustrating the population here, because they woke up one day and the Unrwa clinic was closed and nobody gave them any explanation why it's closed. Mm-hmm. But it's clear that Unrwa is overstretched and given the attack on Shatila, I think, is what triggered them. Once the Zionists attacked Shatila camp, it was then logical that the Israelis are gonna put Palestinian refugee camps in their targets list. Mm-hmm. And so probably they didn't want to be here when such an attack happens. We hope it doesn't happen, obviously, but it is a relegation of duties.
Yes, understood.
It's not only a UN agency, it's also a medical clinic. So you have doctors and nurses that are abandoning their duty to deliver.
So before we've, I think, reached the exit of the camp, I have one last question for you, and that is, wherever I go in the refugee camps in Lebanon, I see this image. It's taken on almost mythical proportions amongst the Palestinian refugees.
Oh, yes.
I know who this is. Could you explain to our audience
yes.
who this is, and why is his image so revered in the refugee camps?
So Abu Ubaida is spokesperson for the military wing of Hamas. That's the other spokesperson for, there's also the fame of the spokesperson for Islamic Jihad. And the reason I think this is taken now such a stature, Abu Ubaida, is because with his anonymity, he is representing all the unnamed and unfaced Palestinian people that are resisting around this world. Our martyrs, our refugees that nobody gives them name after. We see how Western media just lists 100 Palestinians dead, and when one Israeli dies, we hear their whole story. Abu Ubaida is representing the good side of anonymity. Well, if you want us to be unnamed, well, here you are. Our glory is going to be also unnamed. He is embodying all the heroism of the Palestinian people together. And that's, I think, why people are so enamored with him and wish him to stay alive till the day of liberation.
Well, thank you very much, Laith. It has been quite an enlightening experience coming here, and I wish all of these people, as I'm sure you do, safety in these terrible times.
Inshallah.